Good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time of day it is where you are at. Welcome to Collider Dailies. I'm John Aljets, and I'm joined today by a very happy fangirly. It's Maggie. How
It's
you doing?
Maggie. I'm doing really good. I riding that high from my favorite video game last night.
So, in case you couldn't tell by the thumbnail and by the title, we are talking about the Game Awards today, but we're also going to be talking about some other stuff. We're going to be talking about Ryan Reynolds absolutely annihilating the hashtag Deadpool leaks hashtag by flooding it with a whole bunch of fantastic images. And we're also going to find an excuse to talk about Farscape. But to start things out, we're going to kind of jump into the Game Awards here because there's a lot from the Game Awards that we are going to talk about. Uh, so yes, Game Awards happened last night, and there's a lot of feelings, a lot
There's
of
so
good
many feelings.
feelings, a lot of bad feelings, a lot of angry feelings. But let's dive right into it with the big winner, which was of course Baldur's Gate. They brought home just so many awards, including of course Game of the Year. They also won Best RPG and just a slew of other stuff. Maggie,
I'm
you are you are so stoked.
I'm so
What like I was on Twitter as I was watching the show last night, and anytime Baldur's Gate was even so much as mentioned, you were popping off on Twitter.
yeah.
What are your feelings? What are your thoughts?
I am so excited for this game. I mean, I feel like it was already the game of the year, whether it won or not. But having that game of the year like tag is just like so great for it. And I think that the developers and all of the crew and the voice actors and the entire like creative team is just so special feeling. Like the way that they interact with fans, the way they've been so responsive to like changes and requests throughout like early access into like the official release. And I also love like the way they handled last night, like dropping a hot fix in the middle of the Game Awards, and then also launching on Xbox right afterwards. I just felt like that was a really great sign of like how they have very much been like fan forward and also just like creatively speaking. They also feel like they're very much like very pro worker, which has been really great as well, especially with so much stuff that's going on in the game industry. You know, there were people outside of the Game Awards last night, both protesting the fact that so many people have been laid off in the game world this year, and also from the SAG-AFTRA because of the video game contract that were have voted to strike in that if they don't come to good conclusions. So there's a lot of other things going on outside of the Game Awards that felt also very much represented inside of the theater last night.
I will say I do think that the fact that they didn't acknowledge, I understand why they didn't
Mm-hmm.
from a PR perspective, but the fact they didn't address the fact that literally thousands of workers within the video game industry have been laid off within the last few months even, it it felt a little tone deaf,
Yeah.
especially as something that is supposed to be a celebration of developers and their work. Although that being said, there was also the whole fact that people weren't really able to celebrate the
No.
developers because when someone won an award, they were only given about 30 seconds to talk. And a lot of people pointing out, oh, well, the announcer, when they're coming up to announce the uh, category, was able to talk for as long as they wanted, but it's the person who won the award couldn't,
Yeah.
give their proper thanks in time. And the fact that, the show is like 85% advertisements and
Yeah. It felt like
reveals.
E3, not a Game Awards,
Well,
which
that's kind of been the Game Awards
I
since
know.
their inception. This year was particularly egregious, I think,
Yeah.
mostly because a lot of my developer friends and things of that nature, the situation with all the layoffs and everything is something that is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. So it is, seeing something being so blatantly capitalistic, I don't think sold quite as well with some folks.
No, it definitely seemed like the vibes were off in that regards last night. And that being said, there were a lot of really exciting looking games last night. There were a few. There's one in particular that, hang on, I'm gonna have to get the name of it, or I'm gonna completely forget what it was. It was the Banchers Ghosts of New Eden.
Oh yeah,
I
that
have no
looked
idea
really
if
good.
that's a franchise or if there's other games, but the trailer looked
If it
so
is,
cool.
I don't know.
It looked really cool.
I was excited. Usual June was one that they revealed during the pre-show, which wasn't really a pre-show because they did awards during the pre-show, but that's fine. Uh, Rise of the Ronin looked really, really good. That
Yeah, that
one
one looked
particularly
good.
jumped out to me. Obviously we're getting another Mana game, which is a huge thing. Visions of Mana. That is always super exciting for me. And Jet Set Radio is coming back, which Sega showed up and just decided to drop all of the announcements in the span of about 10 seconds. Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, like what the Shinobi, what the I don't know. That got me excited as somebody who loved the Genesis growing up.
Blade, the Blade video game.
The Blade game from Arcane Studios, that'll probably be really, really good.
It looks so good from what we saw. But obviously, it's like way out, but I still think we're going to get it before we get the movie. So,
You're probably not wrong. But going through the winners here, we have Game of the Year went to Baldur's Gate 3. Best Direction went to Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 was also another big winner for the night. They won, I believe, 3 awards, which is fantastic. Any opportunity I get to see Sam Lake, just period, like just get to see Sam Lake is always like super thrilling for me. Mostly just because every time that I see him, all I see is Max Payne, which is just especially seeing him on stage dancing with Poets of the Fall and everybody, and I'm just like sitting there, I'm just like, yeah, that's Max Payne. Um, I can't divorce the image of Sam Lake's face being on that character in the first game from him in reality. It's a weird like cognitive dissonance that I always have to go through. But he is somebody who I look up to a lot. He's quite an inspiration for me as a writer and as a developer. So it's always good to see him get some recognition. Yeah, because they won best game direction, best narrative, and best art direction. All went to Alan Wake 2. I still need to play Alan Wake 2.
me
Have
too.
you played any?
I haven't, but I've watched some playthroughs because I kept seeing the musical number on TikTok, and I was like, well, now I have to see what like the actual gameplay looks like. It looks really cool. I'm not really familiar with Alan Wake as a like franchise or whatever, but they definitely the musical aspect caught my attention, and it makes me happy that like weird games won this year. So
That is something that I really appreciate about the games industry, and something that I realized watching a lot of the reveals this year was there were a few like big franchise things, obviously like
mhm,
Monster Hunter and things of that nature showed up, but for the most part most of the reveals were like new original IP or like
mhm.
indie games or things of this nature that like seemed to be really original and really inventive and sort of the stuff that it was trying to do. So that's something that you don't see as much in other forms of media where, kind of franchising is king. But this year, if the Game Awards were any indication, it really seems like originality in gaming is something that they're pushing hard, which I'm super excited about. Back to the awards. Speaking of music, best score went to Final Fantasy 16, a game that I feel like I'm honestly really surprised wasn't in the running for Game of the Year. Not that it would have beaten Baldur's Gate, but I definitely feel like that was what a lot of people talk about, like what games were snubbed from nomination. A lot of people bring up Jedi Survivor, Hogwarts Legacy came up, Starfield obviously came up. For me, Final Fantasy 16 not being there was a little bit of a shock. But they won best music, which honestly it's a Final Fantasy game, so that really shouldn't have surprised anyone. Best audio design went to Hi-Fi Rush, another game that I need to play. I've heard nothing but good things. Yet another win being chalked up for Baldur's Gate. Best performance went to Neil Newbon, uh, who like seeing him get up there on stage, I was just like, yeah, this is
I wish he had
fantastic.
more of a chance to talk, but he's also been on Collider Dailies. So
He
how cool
has.
is
So
that?
if you want to hear his thoughts on voice acting on motion capture, just anything to do with the job. He talked to us about it, and it was a fantastic interview. I will say I do agree with some people that it was a shame that Yuri Lowenthal didn't get, you know,
Yeah.
didn't win. I do love Neil Newbon, and I love his performance as Astarion. I think that Yuri Lowenthal as Peter Parker in Spider-Man 2 would have also been an outcome of that category that I would have been pretty stoked about, because he did absolutely crush it in Spider-Man 2. Games for Impact went to a game that I cannot pronounce. Chaya.
You're on your own here, kid.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I heard it last night, and it like passed
One in
through
one
my
ear and
brain.
out the other.
Just because there's just so much going on during the show. Best ongoing game, which is Cyberpunk 2077, which I thought was a nice turnaround from where it was at launch, which is fantastic. Best indie game, Sea of Stars. That is a fantastic game. Best debut indie game, Cocoon. I've heard fantastic things. It is
Mm-hmm.
on my list. I will say from best debut indie game, the one that stood out to me and the one that I'm definitely going to be checking out was Venba. Uh, just seeing stuff about that, and then it caused me to actually dig in and do some research. And I'm gonna be digging into that one here maybe over this Christmas break. Best mobile game, Honkai Star Rail. That should surprise nobody. For me, that category, the thing that makes me the most excited is the fact that there actually is a game called Hello Kitty Island Adventure now. Uh, just because that one South Park joke will never go away. Best community support, Baldur's Gate 3. That again, surprise to nobody.
They rock.
Best VR AR game, which honestly I didn't even remember them announcing this as a category. Resident Evil Village won that. Not really too much of a surprise. Innovation in accessibility, Forza Motorsport, which I mean, you can play a racing game as if you're blind. Like that's a pretty accessible game. Best action game, Armored Core 6. Best action adventure, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and on and on and on and on. The one category that a lot of people that I'm seeing the most people angry about, best fighting game, Street Fighter 6 won, beating out Mortal Kombat 1, which was the one that a lot of people were, that was a lot of fighting game fans sort of favorite to win that category. Honestly, when that category came up, I said to myself, I was like, it's either going to be Mortal Kombat 1 or it's going to be Street Fighter 6. These two sort of legacy brands being in that category, one of them was going to be a shoe
I
in.
had my bets on Street Fighter just because I think I know the most people who have played Street Fighter.
See, everybody that I know in the fighting community are all about Mortal Kombat. Maybe it's just that's my bubble that
Yeah,
I
and
am
that
in.
like my bubble was Street Fighter. At least I saw a lot of people playing it on TikTok. So maybe that's just my like algorithm, but that was the one that I was like the
Maybe.
most aware of for this year.
And then, of course, as a shock to literally nobody, best family game went to Super Mario Wonder. I will say about Super Mario Wonder and the fact that it was nominated for Game of the Year. Maybe it's just because I'm not as much in the Nintendo sphere, but that game felt like a game where it came out, people were stoked about it for a day, and then nobody talked about it.
Yeah, I actually didn't know there was a new Super Mario this year.
So
I've
that
never
being
actually
a
played
game of the year,
Super
I was a
Mario.
little like, okay,
I've never played Super Mario. I think as an only kid, there was
what
never
the
any.
hell?
Yeah, as an only kid, there was never any like real impetus to play any of the Super Mario games because they always seemed like that franchise was meant for like dual player like racing games and stuff. Like, but that was how it was sold when I was a kid. Was it was very much something that like you raced each other and you had the two controllers and you did the whole thing, and that's how that whole world was always framed. Like there was you wanted like the ideal gameplay was having two people, and I didn't have
I
two
mean,
people.
that is a thing you can do, but
But
I've
I think
never.
that's how it was marketed in the 90s when I was really getting into the gaming stuff. That was the
I
ads that I
actually,
saw, the trailers I saw.
I don't think I've ever heard of anyone actually doing it
Oh,
though,
I know I like all of the
outside
people
of
even
the
now.
Wii game.
No, but even now as an adult, I know a lot of people who like when they go home with their siblings, they play the Super Mario racing games. Like that's the like a nostalgia thing. So I think that
Hmm.
was my specific generation of like 90s babies. We grew up with this idea of that being like a two-player game. So I never played it. I
Fair enough.
completely missed out. I was the Spyro girl because that was a single player game.
I've
Surprise.
just I've just never been too big of a Mario fan or just Nintendo in general. I grew up with a Super Nintendo, grew up with an N64, and then I hopped off the Nintendo train pretty quickly. And even when I had those consoles, I didn't really have too many Nintendo games, like Nintendo published games. It was a lot of like third party games. So I mean, if you look at the collection behind me,
I see a
you'll
lot of
see a lot of
Xbox.
PlayStation and a lot of Xbox,
Yeah.
and you have to look really closely to see my
Switch.
Nintendo Switch down there.
I was gonna say I
And
even have my Nintendo Switch here because I was gonna be see I'm
then
like
my very small cartridge collection
that's wild.
here, which is my Nintendo and Super Nintendo games. But outside of that, I do have a hell of a Game Boy Advance collection over there
I
because
love my Game Boy Advance and my Game Boy
I do
Color.
collect for the Game Boy Advance.
My
That
Game Boy
is,
Color still works.
I will say that the Game Boy line, I am a little bit of a collector when it comes to that. Also, when it comes to the consoles, not just the games, I
Yeah.
am trying to collect every like major console that was released in that line. So that would be the DMG, the Pocket, the Lite, which we'll get to in a second,
The
the
SD.
Color, Advanced SP, Advanced Micro. That's like the line. I have everything except for I don't have a Pocket and I don't have the Game Boy Light.
Mm,
I had an opportunity to buy a Game Boy Light, which if you don't know what a Game Boy Light is, it was a Japanese exclusive
hmm.
console. It released like a few months before the Game Boy Color. It's effectively a Game Boy Pocket with a front light. Uh, it's a cool novelty. It's ridiculously expensive to get in the States nowadays. Like we're talking like hundreds upon hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
And my friends at local game store down in Oregon, Video Game Wizards in Malala, Oregon, they have a Game Boy Light, and I think they still have the same Game Boy Light, unless they sold it at Portland Retro, which is possible that they could have. I haven't been down there since, but they had it price tagged for 150, and I was looking at it and I was like, I think I'm gonna buy that. And Chris, the worker there, was like, actually that is way underpriced. So if you want to buy it now. Otherwise, we're going to I'm gonna have to like increase the price. So this is your one opportunity to get it for 150. And I was like, I can't swing it. I can't swing it right now. And he's like, oh, that's a bummer. And then as soon as I went to go leave the store, I saw him put a price sticker on for 280. And I was like, oh, and it's been there every time that I've gone in, and I've kicked myself every single time.
I only
Uh,
ever had three of the Game Boy handheld devices. I had my Game Boy Color, which was hot pink. I had my Game Boy Advance, which was blue, and then I had the Game Boy SD, which was with the like bright red. And those are the three that I had, and then I fell off the Game Boy the train after that.
I I love them so much. I still play them to this day pretty regularly. I got into modding them because one of my like hobbies is doing electronics works and things of that nature. So I've modded every single one of the consoles that I have that is worth modding. Like I haven't modded my micro, because why would you need to mod the micro? And also
Yeah.
that thing's like almost $300 by itself. I'm not opening it. Uh but I have like a super nice pimped out Game Boy Color. I've got a super nice
Mm.
pimped out Game Boy Advance. Those are my two main that I play. I feel like we've gotten
I'm gonna
way off
say that.
topic.
Do you want to know what game threw me completely off of my Game Boy love? It was the Kingdom Hearts. I think it's Chain of Memories.
Oh,
I
the Game
hated
Boy Advance one,
I
the
hated that
card
game
one.
so much. So much I hated that. And to this day, I still like anytime I like my Nintendo Switch, like I've kind of gotten over it. But whenever I see something that's going to be like a release for a handheld device, I always just assume it's going to be like a remash of the original game, but like 10 times more difficult to play and useless to the plot.
Even though nowadays that's not the case.
It's not, but my brain is still wired to like just how much that game annoyed the heck out of me as a kid.
Although these days for me, my Switch is pretty much just a Pokemon machine at this point.
Mm.
Because if there's a portable game, or if there's a game that's coming out that I want to play portably, I have a Steam Deck. So I'm probably just going to play it on that. Uh, but
I got mine to play the
again,
Hades game and the Spyro remastered. I love my Spyro remastered on Switch.
I could just pop that on my Steam Deck and good to go. But yeah, my Switch is just for Pokemon, basically. Which actually we're getting the next Pokemon DLC, so
Which
I'm
like
gonna
your
have
what,
an
your Pokedex?
I'm gonna have an excuse to use my Switch again here real soon. I think that launches, I want to say Tuesday. I
Like
don't know.
real soon.
Heck, it could launch today and I wouldn't know. Uh, but anyways, we got way off topic. Let's move on to the next topic for today. We're gonna be talking about Ryan Reynolds trolling the world with fake Deadpool leaks. So he posted on social media platforms just basically saying, uh, hey, Deadpool started as a leak. It was, when they leaked the test footage, that's what sort of started this whole franchise. So it has a history of leaks. That being said, he isn't super thrilled about people leaking, you know, some of the multiverse elements of Deadpool 3. So he decided that he was going to jump in there and try to screw with the algorithm a little bit. And he posted a whole bunch of fake images that just make me so incredibly happy. The first one that he posted is them standing around with the Predator, which I'm not gonna lie, that is a if that actually happened, I think I would be 100% on board for that. Uh, one of Deadpool walking away from Mickey Mouse with a big old bag of cash, which is the most meta statement I think I've ever seen in a image. One where Steve Urkel is in the background. Apparently, Steve Urkel is going to be in the multiverse, and just a whole bunch of other like just silliness like that. It's Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds. Maggie, what are your thoughts on this? What are your feelings?
I think it's hilarious and so very much on brand for Ryan Reynolds. I think this has really all been fueled by the fact that the set leaks from this week spoiled presumably a character's death. And those were just all over Twitter, and people who I follow who have been actively against spoilers for years, which is gleefully posting them. And I don't really have much like sentimental attachment to any characters in like the Deadpool land because I kind of think everybody's expendable in that universe because it's just so weird. But I was quite miffed. I was pretty disappointed that people were just gleefully posting it, and it's been weird with Deadpool 3 and like just in general that so much has leaked. I'm like, guys, just put up a giant fence or something, like, or send people up there to moderate where those people are clearly standing to take pictures. It's weird.
Well, Ryan Reynolds is, he started something with these sort of fake leaks because now the hashtag Deadpool leaks hashtag, as well as any like related ones, have just been flooded by a
What's
whole
weird?
bunch of fake leaks. And I am here for it because a lot of Deadpool fans kind of took Ryan's sort of call to action and have started creating their own to just sort of blanket over all of the real leaks. I actually managed to not even see the actual leaks. So color me happy. Because all I saw was just a whole bunch of fake leaks and a whole bunch of people got into it. Even like Dan Trachtenberg posted
Yeah.
some fake leaks. Like it's so brilliant to see so many people jumping on that bandwagon. It was a lot of fun to see all the ridiculous cameos that people were coming up with.
It's fun. I do like when things like this happen and like the fandom as a whole like gets in on it. And I hate Scoopers so much, and I have so many feelings. I could go on another long tangent about the Scooper culture of Marvel projects and like in particular. Like obviously we see this with DC to some extent, but I feel like DC manages to have things down a little bit tighter than Marvel does, which is hilarious because Marvel's the one that everyone jokes about, like Kevin Feige's going to snipe you, but like the entire plot of most movies is just out there for Marvel. It's very strange.
Well, there's entire communities that are just dedicated to leaking and spoiling Marvel projects.
It's weird. It's
It's the whole thing.
I feel like there's definitely ways that Disney could handle that.
I have spent a grotesque amount of time lurking in those communities doing this job.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, who among us has not been on the Marvel Leaks Reddit before it got taken down because the mouse came for them? But
oh, they're back, just under a different name.
I know they're back. I'm not gonna.
We aren't going to talk about them, but they are back.
They're
They
back.
are out there. So if you do want Marvel leaks, it's possible for you to find them.
I mean,
Although
hey,
that being said, don't.
I
You're
will
only ruining it
say,
for yourself.
in the history of leaks, my favorite leak of all time was when the plot of The Rise of Skywalker leaked on Reddit, the entire plot, and Burger King Germany did not realize that it was actual plot leaks, and they did a whole campaign around them, and they spoiled all of the stuff that happens in the Rise of Skywalker in German, but it was a whole social media campaign with like video content and trailers and all sorts of stuff, and they spoiled everything
I love that
accidentally. It
so
is
very
my
much.
favorite. We actually have an article on Collider that the features team did a couple weeks ago, could be a couple months ago now, about that. That was like my personal like favorite weird thing that's ever happened in fandom. And you just mention it in certain circles on social media, and it is everybody loves it. It's a thing.
Speaking of our features team,
Do you see how I
they wrote an
segue?
they wrote an article a little while back that got me back into Farscape. I have started rewatching Farscape because of a feature article on
Oh, I
Collider.com.
love that.
Uh, we posted an article basically talking about the relationship between John Crichton and Aaron Sun and how it like really broke the mold as far as uh, TV romances. And we decided that that's not the title. We decided that we were going to I'm just jumping on Adam here. Uh,
Our poor producer.
we figured that we would use this as an excuse to talk about Farscape because we don't get to nerd out about Farscape too much. I did a video based on this article, and I started it off by saying that a lot of times I feel like Farscape is something that I made up as a child, like it was some sort of weird fever dream, and then I'll see a meme or I'll see a like video clip or something that reminds me, no, I'm not crazy. This was an actual show. Uh, Maggie, what are your thoughts and feelings on Farscape? What is your personal history with Farscape?
I've been in on it since the very beginning as a kid. I think my aunt was more into it than my parents were, but like I was also really into it because I really liked Ben Browder. And I watched it like religiously when it was on. And then I think once it started airing on the old sci-fi before they changed their name to SYFY, that's when like my mom got in on it with me watching it. So that like the rerun syndication vibes is how we got into it. And then I watched it through multiple times as a kid because I was a sci-fi kid, so I just always watched the reruns of TV shows when it was on sci-fi. I did try to rewatch it earlier this year as like a going to sleep show, and I got way too invested, and I couldn't because like I like putting on like old nostalgia things to like listen to and watch as I'm going to sleep. But I got too invested in it again for it to be like my nighttime routine. So I haven't rewatched it in totality this year, but I've watched like a little bit of season one, a little bit of season two.
I don't think this could be a show that I could fall asleep to just
No,
because
I don't know why
there's
I
too
thought it.
much going on.
There's so much going on, and it was like I was like, oh, I could put it on. Like I put on like SG1, and that's fairly easy for me to like listen to with my glasses off. But Farscape's the one that I was like, wait, I need to see what's happening. Let me put my glasses on and sit up in bed and watch what's happening.
If
Um,
you don't know what Farscape is
fever
and you
dream.
are currently listening to this and thinking that we're just crazy people, Farscape was a show that debuted in the I believe early or late 90s, early
I think it was
2000s on the Sci-Fi
99,
Channel.
99 to
Yeah.
it was either 98 or 99 to 2003, I think.
Yes, I believe you're right on that. On the Sci-Fi Channel, and it was a Jim Henson production. Uh, Basically, the idea of the show was this Earth astronaut got flung into a wormhole and got flung across the galaxy and found himself aboard a living ship with a ragtag crew of individuals. It was Guardians of the Galaxy before, the
Guardians of
movie was a
the
thing.
Galaxy. Yeah.
I I people who were saying it was Guardians of the Galaxy before Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm like, those comics have been around since the
Yeah.
70s, so that
It's the
statement
movies.
is incorrect. But uh it very much has the Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. Uh and yeah, and it's just them on their continuing adventures aboard this ship, doing all kinds of stuff, getting into crazy stuff. It culminates in like an entire galactic war, which kind of just like talk about escalation. It ran for 4 seasons, had a massive cliffhanger as its last episode,
Yeah.
but then thankfully, not long afterwards, they were able to secure the rights to be able to do a film, so they were able to wrap up their cliffhanger, but it did leave a lot of folks at the time
Anxious? Yeah. And that was
Very
a fun
upset.
time. Like, I constantly talk to, like, whenever I see people on TikTok, like, complaining about TV shows now that are in the younger demographic, I just have to be like, you guys are so blessed now, because back when we were watching shows that we cared passionately about, like, there were no trailers aside from the ones for, like, the next episode that ran at the end of it. Maybe one midweek if, like, you caught it at the right time. There were no, like, video platforms to go rewatch them on. There was, like, no places to really analyze things. The most you got from interviews was like maybe on a website, but that you would maybe see when you logged in to check AOL mail. But like you had to go get a TV guide or an Entertainment Weekly and like hope maybe they talked about the things you cared about in an interview that isn't even about this week's episode because it was done like 3 months ago and it's now running. Like it was such a different time back then to like care passionately about these shows. And I think that's one of the reasons why like you and I, like why these shows still linger with us, because there was so much that we had to cultivate personally. So there was like a much more like a personal stake in these shows than there are now, where we're like fed all of this media constantly throughout the week before a new episode or something like that. I just feel like there's a very different relationship that our generation has with these quirky little shows.
Maggie, your millennial is showing like
I'm,
very, very hard.
I'm sorry. I am what I am. I'm a
I
millennial
will I will
nerd.
say this show very much feels in line with me with a lot of the sort of late 90s early 2000s sci-fi
Yeah.
shows, stuff like Firefly, Babylon 5. It all kind of
First final
falls into
conflict.
that realm for me. Maggie, out of like all of those kind of shows, you got stuff like Sequest, you've got, as I said, Farscape, you've got Babylon 5, you've got, so much other weird stuff. I'm Earth 2. Like, what are some other like weird, bizarre sci-fi series? Where would you rank Farscape
Among them.
among the weird sci-fi television of the late 90s, early 2000s?
Okay, well, SG1 was like my favorite show. I watched all of that and Atlantis and like all of those. So I would rank SG1 as number one probably. And I think Atlantis came later into the mid aughts. So I would probably put that somewhere lower. But I think SG1's number one, and then Farscape, and then Earth Final Conflict. I love that show to
Oh
death.
God, Earth Final Conflict. I
I
forgot about that show.
I love that show. And then obviously, this is not including like Star Trek Voyager, which was also on at the same time, because I don't think that's a weird or quirky. Like that was very much like a mainstream sci-fi.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't really bring
yeah, and I
the
would
the Star
argue
Trek series into
like
this.
to an extent SG1 was also more of a mainstay of the sci-fi stuff, but I think there was weird fan stuff with that because some people really liked the movie and they didn't really like TV show as much, and then the TV show ended up eclipsing the movie, and that
And
one
then there
seemed
were
like
some people who liked the movie who didn't even know there was a show.
yep, yep. So I think that one I would still classify into like the sci-fi, because Star Trek was off on its own. UPN, I think at that point was where it was
Yes.
streaming, or streaming,
Streaming,
airing.
airing.
You see how you have to shift your whole brain back to a completely different style of talking about these shows. But in terms of the sci-fi stuff, I think it would go SG1 and then Farscape, or my like top two.
I would, as far as weird sci-fi shows, I mean, Babylon 5 is top for me.
Yeah,
Although they were already basically done before like Farscape and them
yeah,
were
because that wrapped
hitting
up
their
like
stride.
2000, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that was the end of the show. And we don't talk about Crusade um
No.
for good reason.
And I will say, like, I liked Firefly, but I was never the person that was like, "Oh my god, we need more." I liked
You
the
weren't a
movie.
brown coat?
I wasn't, no, because that has really weird connotations, and I
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
really hate that that's the fandom name for that. Like, there's so many weird stuff with like just Firefly in general because of like who created it and blah 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 blah, and some of the plot lines that thank God they never got to do. Like, I don't know if you've ever read up some of those plot lines. They are
Some of the stuff that they were thinking of doing with like Inara and
horrifying. I'm so glad we got one
it
season of
got
One Piece.
weird.
Horrifying. So I'm very glad that that show only got one, because I think that that would have caused so much worse discourse than it already has. But I did like it for what it was, and I love the cast, and I did really like Serenity, the movie. I watched it like in our portable car DVD player as a kid a bunch when we were like going.
Again, your millennial is showing.
I am what I am. But that one I don't even think goes into my top 5 because it was like such a blip in the sci-fi world, and I think it's wild that that fandom has persevered throughout so much. They
I
have
don't I
really had
don't think that it's that wild. Like honestly, out of all of the fandoms going strong, Firefly is the one that surprises me the least. Just
really.
because, again, it being something that is created by the person who created it, he had a tendency to
He did have,
generate
yeah.
he had a tendency to generate some pretty strong fandoms that are still going today.
This is true.
Uh, Thankfully, ones that have largely,
Fix themselves
yeah.
and
Um,
self-moderate it. Yeah.
but God, yeah, for me, Farscape is pretty high up on the list.
Oh,
Uh,
Andromeda. Do you remember? I mean, again,
I
terrible lead.
Andromeda. You want to talk about problematic shows, or shows that involve problematic people?
Well, yeah,
Uh, I watched the first season of Andromeda, and then I think it just got too weird for my
it got
family,
very
so we didn't
weird.
watch it
I did try to
because
rewatch that like very early on in the pandemic because Prime Video has like all of these shows on there under like the regular main subscription. I tried rewatching that and I was like, nope, too bad, can't do it. I can't
I
rewatch
remember
these
there
either.
being a lot of hype when
Mhm.
Andromeda was coming out in my family because everyone's like, "It's a new Roddenberry show." Like this is so weird. It's a Roddenberry show that isn't Star Trek. Like let's dive in, let's watch it. I remember we watched the first season, and we were like, yeah, like it's a Roddenberry show starring Hercules. Like this sounds
Yeah, I mean, it was
fantastic.
a
Let's
big deal back then.
Yeah, it was. And then it, as I said, it just got very bizarre, very weird, very quickly. And I think my family was just like, you know what? No, we aren't gonna watch this because at the time I was just young enough that I feel like, especially in our generation, we didn't necessarily grow up with TVs in our rooms. So whatever we were watching was what the parents were watching for the most part. And so if my parents didn't want to watch a show, guess what? We weren't watching that show.
Yeah,
Uh, Luckily enough, my parents do have pretty good taste in television and movies. So we did get through, as I said, Farscape, and we watched the entirety of Sequest, which, having rewatched that recently, nobody should have watched the entirety of Sequest. That show is so bizarre.
that's another one that feels largely like a fever dream to me. I mean, I feel like we were particularly blessed with weird sci-fi as kids and also just like weird shows in general because this is like the same era that like X-Files was on and we had Buffy and we had like so many really good shows that today would get canceled like 3 episodes in. Like but those are the
Or would
shows
get one season on Netflix and then
Netflix
they
and
would
then
can it.
canceled. Yeah, like The Devil and the Bastard Son had the same vibes as a lot of the stuff, and that got canceled like instantly on Netflix with no
Yeah.
chance. Even though I think that was growing an audience, it just didn't have a chance. But it hit that same kind of like vibe from the late '90s into the early aughts. But I think so many of the storytellers that are like our peers today were raised on those same sort of weird shows. And it's a shame that like the next generation doesn't have those. They have, you know.
It really was like a weird golden era of sci-fi.
Hmm.
Because so many shows, I feel like so many shows felt like they had to compete with like Voyager and D6 9 that were going strong at the time. And so many shows were stepping up, and we wound up with a lot of hidden gems.
Yeah.
You had the ones that we mentioned, then you had stuff like Sliders.
I love Sliders. I love Sliders so much. This is also the same era as like Tremors. I watched all the Tremors movies on Sci-Fi as well. I love Tremors
They
and
were
the
going
TV
strong during that
show.
time, yeah.
I love that show so much. But it's like so many weird stuff that now is just random things that you hear people mention at conventions when.
And that's the only places that you ever hear about them are at conventions, or if you're hanging out with me and my brother.
I will say I will tweet at least once a year. I'm thinking about Earth Final Conflict today. Is anybody else thinking about Earth Final Conflict today? And I've done this for about 14 years. I used to do it on Facebook and now I use it on Twitter. And it's just like sometimes I'll just think about it. And like, is
Do
anybody else
you
thinking about it?
do you remember the show Cleopatra 2025 starring Gina Torres?
Yes, I do. I do.
I have like a very vague, Like I know what you're talking about, but if you were to ask me to like describe it, I wouldn't be able to tell you anything because I think that's one of those ones that I
I
blocked
remember
out.
like the opening scene and some of the stuff from the first episode like really vividly. And I don't know why that is, can't do long division, but I could give you a play for play for the first time I saw Earth Metal Conflict.
Oh, you know what else was going during this time that was sci-fi adjacent? This was during the heyday of Futurama.
Oh yeah, that
My
is
favorite show of all time, by the way. Absolutely adore Futurama. I feel like my Twitter handle gives that away.
it does just a little bit.
Yeah,
Even though
I
I
do.
have not really watched Futurama, I wasn't into any of the animation stuff like the more mature. I never watched like King of the Hill or like any of this. I just know King of the Hill came on before X Files. That's all I
Here's the
recall.
thing. The correct way to watch Futurama. All right, I'm going to go on record and I will say this is the absolutely 100% correct way to watch Futurama is you watch the show through its entirety and then you watch it through again with the audio commentaries. You have to watch it with the audio commentaries because what I appreciate about Futurama, and actually this applies to all the Graining series, is when they do the home releases, every single episode has audio commentary. A lot of shows, when they release, there will be like one or two episodes that have audio commentary. They do every single one.
Hmm.
And to me, that is half of why I love Futurama is listening to like Matt Groening, David X. Cohen, and any of the voice actors or writers or anybody that they could get to do commentary for the episodes. That like so much information about that show is burned into my mind because of listening to those audio commentaries. So that is the correct way to go. Honestly, just listen to audio commentaries for anything that you watch.
Yeah.
Which is something that you need to have physical media to do because you don't get audio commentaries on streaming platforms. So buy physical media. Can you tell that I like stuff physical? Anyways, we should probably wrap this show up because we have officially become the longest running show that we've done yet of dailies. So we're gonna do a couple housekeeping things. Maggie, you have some interviews coming up, don't you?
I do. So I have an interview coming out today with Gael Garcia Bernal talking about Cassandro. We also talked a little bit about his upcoming series La Maquina, and I tried my best to get him to talk about The Boys Mexico, and I didn't get anywhere. I didn't think I
Gotta
would.
try.
But then I'm also really excited. Next week, I have an interview dropping that I am just like so excited about. I interviewed Jason Isaacs this week for Archie, and because I am who I am, there is a question about Baldur's Gate 3 at the end that I can't wait for the Gortash girlies to see. Uh, because you know what? I was like, everybody in this junket is not going to ask this man about Baldur's Gate 3, and I bet he's not expecting it. And I went with it, and it was great. Really great answers, some really good commentary about that character. And I'm very excited for that. So that's coming out next week. And then, yeah. So those are the two that I've talked to so far, and I just interviewed someone else as well. Oh, David Thewlis last week. I talked to him for The Artful Dodger as well as Thomas Brody Sangster. So you can watch all of those on YouTube.
Yeah, or you can read the transcripts on Collider.com.
Yes.
So many different ways for you to sort of ingest interview content
Yes.
straight into your brain space.
Yeah. And
So get over to Collider.
I was gonna say, go back and watch our Neil Newbon and our interview with Tim Downey as well. Now that
Oh yeah,
both of them are in the Game of the Year, and we had them before that was official.
Maggie is far too proud of this.
I'm like a
But
mom.
yes, it was pretty cool that we were able to talk to them. You should go back and check those out. You should go back. You should check out every interview that Collider has ever done. Just start from the beginning and just watch them all. It'll only probably take you about a year. But that's all that we have for you today. Next week on Monday will be our 50th episode, if I'm not mistaken, if my math is correct. So you should tune in for that. I don't think we're doing anything special. I don't even know who's hosting it. Uh, so tune in for that. Otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Maggie, do you have any weekend plans? Are you doing anything fun?
No.
Good answer.
I'll probably
I
be like
have
watching stuff, catching up with
I
life.
have 2 Christmas parties that I'm going to. I'm going
Oh,
to a
very
friend
nice.
Christmas party and to a family Christmas party.
Well, aren't you just the social butterfly?
There's gonna be so much booze. Uh, anyways, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Make good
Drink,
choices, probably
drink.
better choices than the one that I'm gonna make. And yeah, have a good rest of your time.